Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl, and we're back for another Warhammer The Old World video. And we've had so little news over this year, and the one time that I decide to get married and go on honeymoon, we get article after article for Warhammer The Old World. So just to put it in perspective, it's about 6:30 in the morning here in the USA, and I'm reviewing this article, creating a video to put up on YouTube imminently, and I'm about to get married this afternoon. So currently my partner is away getting herself ready, and I'm doing this, but we're going to get it done. We want to get it out as soon as we can, so we are a couple of days behind schedule on this, but it is a key article. In fact, one of the most important articles, I think, in Warhammer The Old World. This is about the movement phase, and of course the movement phase is a really key part of a differentiator between things like Age of Sigmar and Warhammer The Old World, because you've got ranked units and so on. So without further ado, let's dig into the article. So this is back with the Old World Almanac that we started off last time when we looked at the strategy phase, and this says the movement phase introduces marching columns. Okay. So, looked at the turn structure and strategy phase last time. We got a nice classic piece of artwork there for the Bretonnian knights. That's very cool. They look like knights of the realm. Right, so in time to investigate the major mechanics that differentiates this game from other Warhammer games, which is the movement system. Okay, before you can move, you need a formation. It's time to rank up. Now, this is obviously the main thing. This is what people really wanted from Warhammer The Old World, that want from Warhammer Fantasy Battle when they played it, which is a rank and file style tabletop war game. So this is now going to be unique, obviously, within the whole of Games Workshop's games. There's no other game that will play like this. So, formation-wise, all units in the game must adopt a formation which will dictate how they act in battle, including moving and fighting. Most units can only adopt one, which is close order. Okay, so that's your normal formation, but some units will be able to choose options such as skirmish or open order, and for Bretonnian knights, the mighty lance formation. So skirmish and open order, that's typically things like, light archer units and stuff like that. So you think Bretonnian archers, when we covered them in a recent article, and lance formation for the knights. So if we see the formations here, that's your standard close order. Then you've got your skirmish, that's separated apart, that'd be more like, if you think of like when you play games like Age of Sigmar and 40k, they're skirmishing all the time, right, in these type of formations. And there's your lance formation, which is unique to Bretonnian cavalry, which is pretty cool, and normally comes with some special rules, particularly in terms of numbers of models that can fight. Right, so close order units for raiding base-to-base contact, yeah, that's pretty standard, we know that. Where possible, there must be the same number of models in each rank, with more models in the rank than the file, which sometimes means leaving spaces in the back rank if necessary. They move and fight as a single entity, walking, wheeling, charging and exposing their flanks and rears. The more full ranks you have, the greater your advantage in combat. Okay, so that's going to encourage you to field these big units like we saw before, with things like Skaven slaves in the past, and all infantry units really. It was, playing big units with lots of models. However, when they need to move rapidly, your units can adopt a marching column, reforming into a shape that's deeper than it is wide. Okay, the unit formed in this way may not charge, earns no rank bonus in combat, but it can move at triple speed. Okay, so if we think about what they're doing here, and we look at the actual image they've got here for combat order and marching column below, this is going to mean if you're going to be fielding big units with 30-40 models in, they're going to be very, very wide, and that's because as soon as you go to having more ranks than you are, well, so you're not going to have like 5 across and like 6, 7, 8 deep and get those rank bonuses. You can't do that anymore because it's going to put you in marching column, right? And then when you're in marching column, as it says there, there's going to be no charging. You get no rank bonus, so you lose that rank bonus, right? So this is definitely going to give you pause for consideration, because how wide is your unit going to be? So I think that's really going to make people, it's going to cap some of these massive units, because if you're going to be really wide, it's going to be really difficult to wheel. It's going to be difficult to maneuver around the battlefield, and it would mean that, it would be much easier to charge multiple units into the front. So I think that's going to be, it's going to be quite interesting how this plays out. Like I say, if you look here, that's a 15-man unit. You could get another rank. So a 20-man unit is 5x4, but then as soon as you go to something bigger, you're going to be into 6x5, so 30, which is, you're starting to get quite wide. So seeing these massive units that we saw before that will get the narrow frontage and very deep, it's just not going to happen anymore. I think that's really interesting. It's an interesting change. But you do get triple movement. So if you do want to move really quickly, you can put them in this formation and you can move at triple speed, which is quite interesting. Maybe better either. You're not going to do that in a really early game move, I'd have thought, unless you're really far apart on the table, because you'd be then vulnerable to being charged and having no rank bonus. But maybe later on in the game, if you've sort of won a flank and you need to get across somewhere quickly or something like that, that could be quite interesting. It's a nice concept, the whole marching column, and I like the fact it does restrict essentially the big units in terms of having these narrow frontage, very deep units. It restricts that. How much benefit we're going to see these marching columns on the table, I think, would be dependent upon potentially some rules for the units about how quickly they can reform and still move, because of its lack of combat ability. So interesting concept. I like what it restricts. In terms of its use as the marching column, yet to be seen. Units with the skirmisher special rule do not need to rank up at all. That's normal. But every model must be within an inch of at least one of its comrades. They can fan out. They're highly maneuverable. Harrying enemy units with missile fire, as we said. So hit and fade flank charges. So you think, I know Dark Elves aren't kind of on the inside, but you've got Shades, you've got Lizardmen, Skinks were typically skirmish, say Bretonnian Archers were typically skirmish, that sort of thing. They all had those kind of rules. So that's interesting. Open order units still fight in ranks, but meanwhile they're faster, more agile, and handle tough terrain better. Okay, be interesting to see which units get those benefits. But if we look at some of the series I've been doing, which looks at the last army book in that the particular faction had, and what units they had there are some that you can kind of interpret and go, well, that's a light infantry unit, it's likely to have skirmish and so on. Right, onto the proper movement phase itself, right? So we've done the ranking up and the formation element. Right, so looking at the movement phase, we've divided into 4 parts. Yeah, that's what I said before. So first of these is declare charges. You're going to declare your charge first. Now, this is going to be key, guys. This was one of the big questions that everybody had in terms of random charging. So active player nominates each unit that they want to charge their targets. Charging is the only way to enter combat, okay? So you can't move into combat now. You actually have to declare a charge to enter combat. A couple of caveats. The target must be visible to your unit, so you can't charge anyone that's not visible, and it must be at least partially in front arc, okay? That's fine. Your unit cannot be fleeing, rallied, or already engaged in combat. That's normal. You may pre-measure the distance to your targets. That's good. I like that. I didn't like the whole having to guess the distances before, where you had people that were either more skilled or more experienced at the game knew how to put almost markers on the battlefield for distance. That's a skill. You can say, well, that's skillful play. Personally, I like this. I like the pre-measuring. I don't think there's any reason not to pre-measure distance to the targets in this case. Right. Now, it still doesn't answer the randomness element. After all this, the inactive player declares charge reactions. Okay, so we've seen that before in previous editions. So most units hold to receive the charge. You can stand and shoot if they've got a missile weapon and are further away than the charging units move. Okay, so you can stand and shoot infantry easier than you can stand and shoot cavalry. Makes sense. Or you can flee by pivoting around 180 degrees and trying to escape. Okay, that's interesting. So maybe you could try that if somebody's charging at long range, because you're going to lose some movement right on that pivot. If you're caught, however, you'll be run down and destroyed. Yeah, that's normal if you're fleeing and you get caught. Beyond that, some especially alert units may countercharge. Now, I like that. Instantly in my mind, I'm thinking cavalry. Because one, there's the cinematic effect of cavalry charging cavalry and that whole clash in the middle. So I like that idea. That's what's in my mind initially is the counter charge, and it makes the game a little bit less one-sided on the charges with some units. That ability to charge back. So. And again, when I think cavalry, I'm thinking that's particularly key for things like lances that need the charge strength bonus. So assuming that's still in the rules, that when you charge with a lance you get a bonus to strength, or you get some kind of bonus to help you in combat, that would definitely make more sense with cavalry to make it a proper fight, rather than these cavalry, these heavy armoured knights sitting there going, oh look, they're charging at me, and just standing there doing nothing and then not getting any bonuses for their weapons. So I like that. Right, second step is to actually make the charge move. To establish the range of their charge, units roll 2 dice. Okay, so we are rolling dice, and you pick the highest score from the 2 and add it to your movement characteristic. Okay, this means a unit of skeleton warriors has a charge range between 5 inches and 10 inches. Okay, so we know skeleton units' move is 4 inches. But Bretonnian knights are rather more dangerous. Their swift stride special rule adds an extra d6 to every charge they make. Okay, so so interesting. So they've kind of gone a halfway house, because you think you get, in terms of you've got a guaranteed charge distance now of whatever your move characteristic is +1. So if you're taking a cavalry, let's say it's 8 inches, which would be typical for, if we look at 8th edition, that's going to be a 9-inch guaranteed charge. Okay, which is not bad, right? Versus, it could go up to 14 if you rolled a 6 on it. But, and of course with the Bretonnian knights there, they get that extra d6 as well. So they could move potentially, that could be a 20-inch charge if you rolled a double 6, which is interesting. I think if you look at it from an RNG perspective, the whole randomness, I think if you actually work it out, you'll probably get more consistency. So if you look at probability, the rolling the 2 dice and adding it together versus the rolling 2 dice, picking the highest and adding that to the move, so there's an element of randomness, which you can see, people have to move, it's going over terrain, there's all sorts of things that can hamper terrain, or you're getting shot at, whatever, that could impact distance of charge. But the fact that you've got that guaranteed movement characteristic piece of charge, I think, I like it. I like this. I think this is an interesting take on a halfway house between going full random and just going it's 2d6 versus going no, it's just double your move. So I like it. I think this is interesting to me. Obviously you need to play it. We need to add all of the rules in the game, and that's something we don't have all the rules yet. So to make prejudgment is difficult. But if you look at this in isolation, I think this is a nice halfway house to give you a level of consistency and a level of a skill level, if you like, where you go, like, I know I can charge an X distance, and that X distance isn't somewhere between 2 and 12. If you look at those skeleton warriors, for example, charge range of between 2 and 12, that's now between 5 and 10, so you've narrowed that range down quite considerably. So I think this is a nice take. I like this. I like taking in isolation. I think that's a really, really good move on finding this balance between full RNG charges and that level where you have the double move and everybody sits 1 inch, particularly with pre-measuring, sits 1 inch outside the charge range and so on with the 2 dice. I mean, you can still do that with this because you'll know what the maximum charge is, but the element of randomness puts people in going, oh, is he going to roll a 6? Do you want to take the chance to maybe get your charge in next turn or do something else? So I like it. Okay, if you're in range, accounting for wheeling, so yes, you're going to have to wheel during the charge potentially, which will cost you charge movement. Move the charging unit into base contact with its target, bringing the maximum number of models from both sides into combat. Okay, yeah, that's not unexpected. If you whiff the roll, however, the charge has failed. Okay, so do you stay stationary? The unit must move the full distance rolled towards its target. There you go. That's another interesting one. So no more if you fail a charge, you stay where you are. If you fail your charge, you move the full distance of your charge. Your warriors haven't got the impetus to complete the charge. Yeah, and you do that, and you're ready to be charged hard next turn. So it's going to make you consider you're not just going to run around the board just chancing charges as much, I think, as well. Which means that, again, I think that mixture of the randomness element, which has been reduced but is still there, I think makes it really interesting because you're not just going to chance these charges either. The fact that you could potentially move, well into the enemy charge range and then just sit there waiting to be charged back by one or multiple units. Okay, interesting. So far, I like what I've read. We've got counter charging in there, with the charge reactions. The formations, there was nothing in there that was surprising, but the charging element, I like what I've read so far. Okay, right, the third step accounts for compulsory moves. Okay, so fleeing units that fail to rally, yeah, they're going to continue to move. Other random movements such as Night Goblin Fanatics, who, yeah, they have to move. Stone Trolls who failed stupidity, yeah, they have to move as well. Okay, so that nothing major there. Fourth step covers the remaining moves, regular maneuvers that don't result in combat. Okay, so mechanics of movement. So what have we got? May move or march, performing maneuvers on the way. In the first case, they move up their movement characteristic and may then shoot later, so you can move and shoot. In the latter case, they may double their pace, so you can double your movement, but you cannot perform any maneuver more complex than a wheel, and their ability to shoot this turn for speed. Okay, so nothing surprising there, to be honest. You move, you double move. If you double move, then you can't shoot or do anything crazy, but you can still wheel, so that's expected. So wheeling, again, pretty standard for a rank and file game here. So to wheel, the leading edge of the unit moves forward, pivoting round one of its front corners, and the distance measured, I'm guessing, will be the distance of the outer model, as in the one that moves the furthest. So if you look on this diagram here, the model that moves the furthest is this corner. If we look at the bottom, and it will be the distance from here to here, and then up. Okay, so while moving, a unit may wheel, in which the unit pivots from one of the front corners of its leading edge, measuring distance from the outside model. You may also turn all a unit's models through 90 or 80 degrees, spending a quarter of your movement for each 90 degrees. So Eric talked about the fact that you could flee as a charge reaction. That's going to cost you half your movement to do that. So it'd be interesting to see what more detail there is on fleeing, because it says you're going to pivot 180 degrees. That's going to cost you half your move. Okay. quite risky. Move backwards or sideways at half pace. That's nice. That's nice. I like the fact that you've got movement with being able to stay in the same direction and same formation. And you can also redress the ranks, so you can resort out your ranks or you can reform. Okay. And then what happens after a charge? At the bottom here, this is nice. This is nice, guys. We've got now, they're starting to put these articles together. So we covered the strategy phase last time, that's here. They've now got a movement phase, and we can see shooting phase is going to be next. Nice. Do you know what, guys? I think this is a nice article. At the moment, I think we should take all judging of how this game is going to be out of the mix, because you can't judge a game looking at rules in isolation, which is what we're doing now. But when looking at some of those things in isolation so far, with what I saw in the last article on the strategy phase and the overall turn sequence in the movement phase, overall, most things I like what I'm hearing. I like what I'm hearing. That's the end of the article. So for me, this was a more important article than the previous one. I think the whole close order marching column thing is a real interesting element to it, in terms of you now have to make sure that if you want to be fighting, you have a wider formation than deep, which is going to affect rank numbers. But how wide you make that unit is going to have a huge impact. You know, when you wheel, they're going to have to move further. Moving between units, moving through round terrain is going to be really hard on these really wide units. So while there was a concern before we were going to see these enormous units, and it doesn't stop it, but it does. It's going to start to make people think about how they move around terrain, how they move around their units, with having units that have got an absurdly large, wide front just to get these deep ranks for numbers of models. So, you know, I certainly at the moment I'm thinking in my mind, you know, 20 to 30 models in that sort of frame could be kind of like an average. Could be an average, as what we see. So no more seeing 60 models, let's say, which are going to be 6 across and 10 deep. So yeah, okay. So that I like, and I have to say I really like. One of the biggest questions out there was how charges are going to work, and I think they've come to a nice solution, in my personal opinion, on this bit between full RNG. Full guaranteed movement. I think this is a nice element to that, and it's interesting to see something like the Swift Stride rule, where the Bretonnian Knights get that extra D6, because you know you'd expect them to be charging over a greater distance, and having a more guaranteed chance of making that charge, given what they are, their training, their horses, and everything else. So I like that. The counter reactions, the counter charge stuff, the charge reactions overall. Yeah, great article. I love everything I've heard in this. It keeps my enthusiasm, without a doubt. There's nothing I've seen here that I'm going, oh my god, this is going to be a disaster. I actually am quite pleased with these two articles. There's still obviously shooting phase and combat phase to go. And that then doesn't take into account things like faction rules, special rules. There's lots of other things to cover, like I say. That's why we don't want to make a full judgment now on the game. But from what I've read so far, I am pleasantly surprised in some areas and pleased in across the board. So there you go, guys. That's the end of this article. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down, but let me know why in the comments down below. And as before, you know, unfortunately, I can't do anything more with the quality of this. I'm on a laptop in a hotel room, about to get married, and I'm trying to do my best to keep up to date with the Old World content. And in 2 weeks' time, things should be back to normal. If you want to see more content though, please hit that subscribe button. It's totally free for you to do. You can see how committed I am to this. So please hit that subscribe button. It's really, really, really important for me. So thank you for that in advance. you've been watching The Ghost Owl. Tune back in for some more Warhammer The Old World content that I'm sure is coming over the next few weeks and months leading up to Christmas.